Angela Rayner's £700,000 Brighton bombshell. The property empire she doesn't want you to know about. Right? Let's talk about political hypocrisy, shall we? Because what I'm about to tell you about Angela Rayner's latest property purchase will have you questioning everything Labour claims to stand for when it comes to housing inequality and tax fairness. The Deputy Prime Minister has just splashed out £700,000 on a swanky Brighton beach house, her third property. Mind you, at the exact same time she's hammering ordinary families with council tax rises and demonizing second homeowners. If that doesn't make your blood boil about the sheer brass neck of our political class, frankly, you haven't been paying attention to just how disconnected these people are from the lives of ordinary Britons. Now, before we dive into the delicious details of this political car crash, let's establish exactly what we're dealing with here. Angela Rayner, the woman who presents herself as the authentic voice of working-class Britain, the former care worker turned Deputy Prime Minister who never misses an opportunity to lecture others about fairness and equality, has just become a three-property mogul. We're not talking about some modest investment here. We're talking about a luxury three-bedroom period property in one of Brighton's most sought-after streets, where similar houses sell for up to £3.5 million. This is the same woman who, just last year, was busy attacking Jeremy Hunt's vast property empire during the election campaign. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Let's break down exactly what Rayner's property portfolio looks like now, because the numbers are genuinely staggering for someone who supposedly represents ordinary working people. First, there's her original house in Ashton-under-Lyne, purchased in 2016 for £375,000 and now worth around £650,000, a tidy profit of £275,000 that most of her constituents could only dream of. Then there's a Grace and Favour flat in the Grade 1 listed Admiralty House, overlooking Trafalgar Square, complete with 3 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, the same palatial apartment previously occupied by Winston Churchill and John Prescott. And now, the pièce de résistance, a £700,000 Brighton seafront property that she's already christened with a housewarming party attended by her partner, former left-wing MP Sam Terry. The timing of this purchase is politically catastrophic, and Rayner's team must know it. This Brighton bonanza comes at precisely the moment when Labour is implementing council tax increases that will hit middle-class families hardest, while simultaneously attacking second homeowners and landlords with punitive tax measures. The optics are absolutely dire. Here's a woman responsible for housing policy, living it up in multiple properties while ordinary families struggle to afford rent, let alone think about buying their first home. It's the kind of political own goal that would have ended careers in a previous era of British politics. But here's where it gets really interesting and deeply uncomfortable for Labour. The council tax arrangements around Rayner's property empire have become a source of genuine controversy, with the Conservatives accusing her of flipping her main residence to minimise her tax bill. The mathematics are genuinely eye-opening. If she declares her Ashton-under-Lyne property as her main residence, she faces a second home penalty on her Westminster accommodation that pushes her council tax bill above £4,000. However, if she claims Admiralty House as a primary residence and applies for single-person discount, her bill drops to just £1,525, a saving of over £2,500. Not bad for someone who's lecturing the rest of us about paying our fair share. Shadow Housing Secretary James Cleverly has been absolutely ruthless in his attacks, and frankly, he's got a point when he says Rayner won't even be straight about her own housing arrangements while being responsible for housing policy. He's highlighting a fundamental credibility problem that goes to the heart of Labour's governing authority. How can you trust someone to manage national housing policy when they appear to be gaming the system for their own benefit? The refusal to provide clear answers about which property she owns and where she pays council tax isn't just evasive, it's politically toxic. The security arrangements around the Brighton purchase add another layer of public expense to this already controversial story. Local residents have spotted officers from the Met Police's Royalty and Specialist Protection Command accompanying Rayner as furniture was being moved into the property. That's taxpayer-funded protection for a taxpayer-funded politician's private property purchase, protection that extends to what is essentially a holiday home. The symbolism is dreadful. While ordinary families worry about affording their heating bills, the Deputy Prime Minister gets police protection for her beach house furniture deliveries. What makes this entire saga particularly galling is Rayner's previous rhetoric about transparency and accountability in public life. In a 2023 speech, she declared that holding any position in public life should mean upholding the highest standards of ethics and integrity, and promised to put the right system in place to ensure accountability and transparency across government. Yet when faced with legitimate questions about her own property arrangements, transparency seems to be the last thing on her mind. The gap between her public pronouncements and private behavior is so wide you could drive a removal van through it. The contrast with her treatment of others in similar positions is equally damning. Remember her gleeful attacks on Jeremy Hunt's property portfolio during the election campaign? She positioned herself as a scourge of wealthy politicians with multiple homes, the authentic voice calling out elite privilege and property speculation. Now she's become exactly what she criticized, except with the added twist of using her political position to potentially minimize her tax obligations while maximizing her property wealth. The broader political implications extend far beyond Rayner's personal circumstances. This scandal strikes at the heart of Labour's claim to represent ordinary working families against privileged elites. How can a party led by people with multiple properties credibly argue that they understand the struggles of renters, first-time buyers, and families priced out of the housing market? The authenticity that was supposed to be Labour's secret weapon against conservative privilege has been completely undermined by their own leadership's lifestyle choices. The Brighton property itself tells its own story about Britain's housing inequality. Located on what estate agents describe as a highly sought-after street near the famous coastal city, it's the kind of area where property wealth has become completely detached from local incomes. Brighton had become a playground for London's political and media elite, with house prices that bear no relationship to local wages. For Rayner to buy into this market while simultaneously claiming to represent ordinary people shows either remarkable tone deafness or calculated cynicism. The mortgage arrangements add another dimension to the story. Land registry records show the property was purchased with a six-figure mortgage, which raises questions about how a deputy prime minister's salary and existing property wealth combine to support such borrowing. For most people, a £700,000 mortgage would require substantial income and assets, resources that aren't available to the constituents Rayner claims to represent. The financial privilege required for such purchases highlights the growing gap between political leaders and the people they govern. What's particularly striking is how this controversy intersects with Labour's broader housing policies. The party has positioned itself as a champion of renters and first-time buyers against landlords and property speculators, yet their deputy prime minister has become a prime example of the property accumulation they claim to oppose. The cognitive dissonance is so extreme it borders on the surreal, attacking property wealth while accumulating it, criticizing second homes while buying them, demanding transparency while avoiding scrutiny. The Conservative response has been predictably aggressive, but also strategically smart. By focusing on the transparency issues rather than simply attacking wealth accumulation, they found a line of attack that could resonate with Labour voters who expected better from their leaders. The accusation that Rayner is hiding something through her evasive answers taps into broader concerns about political accountability and whether Labour politicians are any different from their Conservative predecessors. The media coverage has revealed the usual partisan divides, but also genuine discomfort among Labour-supporting commentators who recognize the political damage this story could cause. When your own supporters are struggling to defend your actions, you know you've got a serious problem. The Brighton purchase has become a perfect symbol of everything voters hate about political elites, the rules for thee but not for me mentality that breeds cynicism and disengagement. Looking forward, this controversy isn't going away anytime soon. The Conservatives have found a rich vein of political gold to mine, and they'll continue pressing for answers about council tax arrangements, mortgage details, and the broader question of how Rayner can credibly lead housing policy while building her own property empire. Every future announcement about housing policy will be viewed through the lens of her personal property wealth, undermining the government's credibility on one of their key domestic priorities. The timing couldn't be worse for Labour's broader political project. As they try to establish themselves as competent managers of the economy and credible representatives of ordinary people's interests, the Rayner property scandal serves as a constant reminder of the gap between rhetoric and reality. It's the kind of story that cuts through political noise because it speaks to fundamental questions of fairness and hypocrisy that voters instinctively understand. So there you have it, Angela Rayner's £700,000 Brighton bombshell, a property scandal that perfectly encapsulates everything wrong with Britain's political class. While ordinary families struggle with housing costs and tax bills, our Deputy Prime Minister builds a property empire and games the system to minimize her own obligations. It's hypocrisy on an industrial scale, and frankly, British voters deserve better from their political leaders. What's your take on Rayner's property empire? Is this legitimate wealth accumulation or political hypocrisy of the highest order? And how can Labour maintain credibility on housing policy when their own Deputy Prime Minister embodies everything they claim to oppose? Drop your thoughts and comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to UK Connors, because when our politicians are living in glass houses, someone needs to keep throwing stones.